Well, thank you for jumping on the Zoom call. I've got an author here, Rich Noble. He wrote a book on the mission together, integrating missions into the local church. This is a great conversation. It's an encouragement to pastors on how you can incorporate missions in your church and why you should incorporate missions in your church. Stay tuned. Are you wanting to develop your own short-term mission teams? Or maybe you have taken teams out, but you want to go to a next level of success? Well, what we've done is we've developed this mission packet for you on steroids. It covers from A to Z. It's over 50 pages long. You can download this today, brand it to your own ministry, and modify it to your needs. All you got to do is go to the description of this YouTube video, click on the link, go to our website and download it today. Get started in short-term missions today. All right, Rich, thank you for joining on the Zoom call and just kind of sharing your heart about missions. You are an author. That's how I found you. You wrote a book on mission together, integrity missions in the local church. And I just think you're the perfect guy to talk to because, you have a heart and passion for missions. And one thing, obviously, we'll talk more about it throughout the video. You're not, people need to understand this. You're not like a full-time missionary. You haven't been in the full-time missions, but you are an individual that works in the local body of a church that basically promotes and helps advance mission work within the body of the church. Am I correct?
That is correct. Couple of times in my life, and then, by the way, it is a great joy and pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you.
I'm excited. Missions, it's one of the things that really gets me up in the morning and gets me going throughout the day, and I think it does with you as well.
Oh, sure.
The traditional missionary, there've been a couple times in my life where my wife and I both walked into that doorway considering a couple opportunities, and the times that has happened, the Lord has been very clear. No, you're not a sent one. You're a sender. You're a mobilizer. So do what I've designed you to do, what I've prepared you to do, and be involved with the short-term things, and be involved with reaching the nations that are coming to you. But function as a mobilizer and sender rather than a sent one.
Yeah. And if you don't mind, I'm going to just say this because I've seen this, and I think you're the perfect example of to share with people is that people get this goosey feeling and coming on short-term missions. They're like, wow, I'm a full-time missionary. And then, maybe it doesn't work out. They realize that they weren't called to go to the full-time missions, but see, then they let it die from there. And they don't realize, just like you're saying, you can assume the role of being the sent one, the sender, the one that will help advance mission work. Because, I, as a missionary here on ground in country, how much would I enjoy having someone in the United States saying, okay, Sean, this is what we're going to do to promote the work that you're doing. And then basically be a partner in that. Sometimes it's not like us missionaries. Hey, we just want money. That's all we want from you. That's really not the case. We're looking for people to be logistical partners to basically tie, obviously the United States, because obviously that's where I'm from, tie the United States into the mission field and then have someone there on ground in country in the United States to say, hey, look, I'm partnering with you. I'm helping sending teams. I'm helping sending the work to you so we can do global missions together. So anyway, didn't mean to interrupt you. I apologize.
No interruption. Because you're hitting on the most important aspect of this. This is a team sport. I always talk about evangelism being a team sport, but outreach in general, whether it's a local, regional, or global, we're in this together. I think it's Missio Nexus talks about it, has the phrase, we're better together. That's they didn't coin the phrase, but they use that. We're better together. God designed it that way. It even says in the scriptures, in Romans 10, for example, how are they going to hear unless somebody preaches to them? Well, how's somebody going to preach them unless they've been sent? Well, somebody's got to send and somebody's got to support. And in our day and age, it is so much easier than it ever has been in all of history to collaborate together on fulfilling the Great Commission, to be involved with Great Commission activity and kingdom work around the world together, and not even necessarily have to leave our hometown or home culture.
Amen.
But we still send those out. People like yourself are sent everywhere around the world to all people groups. But we don't just send and release. We send and stay partnered together, because that's what we need to do. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that people have made comments, and this really is not following our outline here, but I'm going to throw this out. People make comments are like, sending mission teams to the foreign lands is such wasted money. They should just send the money instead. But see, I myself as a missionary, sure, what does a mission team cost? Just roughly $20,000 to $30,000. Sure, yeah, send it down my way. But I would be the first to say, actually, I wouldn't agree with that, because I've seen a lot of people, their mission work has bloomed out of that experience of being in the mission field. So, like you said, a sender, sender's a definition can be wide, it can be a broad definition, but sending teams is a very critical component of people experiencing the mission field, because if they don't experience the mission field, how are they going to be more aware of what needs to be done in the mission field if they don't experience that?
Yeah. I think the argument of why are we spending all this money, and I think there is some truth to that. But why I say that is because that question, that statement alone, kind of begins to peel back the short-term missions machine that we've created in our culture. Mm-hmm. It's not all bad. Sure. But if we're honest with ourselves, a lot of what we've done as short-term missions has ended up being not as good as it could be. And what we end up creating is a culture of people doing these trips to either check off something on my spiritual development list, or B, it's a nice resume builder that we put on there, or C, it becomes a religious tourist kind of trip, or some combination of this. None of that is bad in and of itself. But I think that raises the bigger issue of, I'm a huge proponent of short-term missions, but I'm always quick to say, let's make sure we're doing it right and doing it in a healthy way from beginning to end, and doing it as part of long-term field strategy, so that we're not just sending teams for the sake of sending teams so that we can say, oh, look what we've done, but rather we're doing it more in partnership with the field, so that we're in alignment with what the missionary long-term goals are, what the national church's goals are. Because we're there for the national church. We're not even there for the missionary. We're there because the missionary is there for the church too, or to establish a church. So I think if we approach it with the right motives and see short-term missions experiences as part of a piece of the long-term strategy, and we do it well, debriefing and following up and following through, that's when it's going to be successful. Otherwise, there's a whole industry of short-term missions out there. So there's some truth to that. Well, wouldn't it be better? In some cases, yeah, it would be better. But in other cases, when done right, no, this is very valuable. We want to have people come down and do ministry. Yeah. And I do address that a little bit in my book, but I know we have a lot we want to kind of cover and focus on, but that's something that I'm very, you probably couldn't tell this, but I get a little passionate about it. Yeah, no, I can see the passion. So like I said, the reality we got in the notes here, the reality of missions, some won't be involved, some will muddle through it, and then some will excel. And then it has to be intentional. And I think it's really good that we kind of did do that sideline on the short-term missions, because I think that one thing that we try real hard is to try to fit those mission teams into what we are trying to accomplish on ground here. And I know that my pastor said,
he talked to a guy one time and he was talking about, hey, let's bring a mission team down there. He's like, no, I don't want your mission team. It's like, what? No, I don't want your mission team down here. You guys just get in my way. And, really, it's just kind of more of a troublesome than not. And again, I don't even know who the man is. And, I don't really know the intentions of his heart, but I think it really kind of falls into what you're saying is, if we really view mission teams and the USA based missions, and if we put them in the proper perspective, in the proper context, I mean, it's extremely valuable because I always say, at least in my view and the experiences I've had, the expansion that we have done on ground here in Honduras never could have been accomplished without mission teams coming and having actual partners in the United States that took a genuine interest of what we were doing down here. It's not just saying, oh, like you said, not necessarily towards in this fact, but I can kind of fit it into this. It's kind of like, we're just going to throw some money at it each month and just kind of fulfill our warm and fuzzies of missions. But really, there's no heart in being involved in missions, if that makes sense. And it kind of goes into what we said, just some just kind of muddle through it. So anyway, let's talk about that. Some won't be involved, some will muddle through it, and then some will excel.
Yeah, I think you're really onto something there. At any given time, I mean, from the mobilization side, from the sending side, we're always, and as a pastor and church leaders, we're always trying to get people engaged in missions. And my hope and part of where this book came out of is to try to help the church understand that we are on a mission from God, like the Blues Brothers. If you've ever seen that movie, we're on a mission from God. That has a local expression, a regional expression, and a global expression. The Acts 1:8 paradigm: Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth. And so many times, I would suggest most of the time, what we've done is we've created a category. This is missions. This is one of the ministry programs that we do in the church. This is evangelism, or sometimes, and I'm not sure where you fall on this, but I know you've probably heard these things before. Sometimes we say, "Oh, well, we're doing missions in our neighborhood," and I kind of brush up and say, "No, you're doing evangelism. This is an area that has," and that's a whole other discussion. But because not everything is missions, but missions, being involved in the mission, partnering with God's mission, that's something that should be part of everything that we do. So that it's not that missions and in this case global outreach, it's not that that's one of the things we do. It's a part of everything we do. It's not just a one shot a year ministry program. It's not something we delegate to just the youth group to do their annual trip somewhere. This is something that's a part of everything we do. It guides us, the mission of God, because that's why we're here. We've been blessed with things like salvation. We've been blessed as recipients of the gospel, not to keep it to ourselves, but to share it with others, to be a blessing to other people and to share the same blessings we receive with others. And that's what it is to live on mission. And we do this, again, we do it together. We do it together as church families. We do it together as the Church of Jesus Christ. We do this together in terms of senders and sent ones. No matter how you break that together down, as God's people, we're on mission together, and we're on mission with God because it's His mission. It's not ours. This isn't something we made up. It's His mission. It's His desires for us. So some people will just muddle along. They won't quite catch that.
Yeah. So you
that's
feel
what we're trying
like
to do.
You feel like the Great Commission can't be divided, as in meaning, well, like you said, hey, we just do the work within our neighborhood, but then ignore, like regional and international. You feel like it can't be divided and say, okay, well, this church is going to take the piece over here and that's going to be a local, but this church has more of an international hunger, so they're just going to go and devote their attention to international. It really doesn't work that way, and we talked about that, where it's more of a balance that has to be there's a balance that has to take place. And we talked about that. And, we really, it all kind of starts out with it really all is, center focused around our pastor within the church.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about that how pastors need to have the right heart and the attitude towards missions. And there's different ways that can be accomplished. And you respect the fact that you understand that one church might be like our church. We have Central America on our hearts. So we have the Central American flags out in front of our church. We have the Central American flags in our sanctuary. Why? Because we have the heart for Central America. We are passionate. We're passionate about Mexico as well. So I'm just saying that is one of our focus. But also local areas are focused as well. And we're focused on the 7 surrounding states of Kentucky. That's our vision of our church. So we are actively trying to do something in all areas of those areas. But at the same time, you recognize that it may be on different levels. And we're going to talk about that on how pastors can be involved. And it doesn't necessarily mean that their physical hand has to be involved in that.
Right.
So, one thing that pastors' attitude should change in the sense that they should seek the Lord and pray about it and be open to the Lord leading them in the arena of international missions. And again, I know there might be a pastor watching this and saying, I just don't have a heart for it. But see, again, we're not saying you have to go out and physically do it yourself. So let's go ahead and talk about that, suggestions for a pastor to be more involved in missions.
Yeah, this is, you thought I was getting passionate about short-term missions. Wait till you hear this. Now, this is part of, in terms of missions in the mobilizing piece, of special concern for me is not just the short-term missions piece, but also how do we get pastors on board, as well as how do we mobilize people from every ethnic group. But that's another discussion in itself. But pastors need to begin by recognizing that the Great Commission does not limit us to our hometown or our state or anywhere else. It's the Great Commission means that we're engaged in the mission by doing evangelism in our local community and the local expression. We do evangelism in our region, and because our region may have some cross-cultural elements, then we start to engage in global missions kinds of things. And then, of course, the ends of the earth piece. Pastors are key to this. They're the key leaders. And there's so many pastors. You and I both know, and I think the people watching, I suspect this will not surprise them, but there's too many pastors. And I'm part of a particular denominational family that is very strong on missions. And we still have so many pastors that agree up here, yes, we're supporting of missions, but it doesn't translate to anything more than we give money to our funds. Missions in many cases isn't even on a pastor's radar screen. And that's just my denominational family. But looking across just the North American landscape, and we can start talking about the Western landscape, we can talk about the whole world. If missions isn't integrated, isn't part of the DNA of a pastor, and their training to become a pastor, it's going to be hard to lead the church in that way. But that doesn't mean that a pastor can't overcome that. If you go back, some of my favorite quotes from 100 years ago speak directly to this, and these are really timeless words. I mean, as if the Bible speaking wasn't enough, right?
Yeah.
100 years ago, 120 years ago, in 1900 in New York City, in that time period, late 1800s, early 1900s, great movement of missions conferences and things happening all over the country, missionaries being sent out, often being led by student volunteers. It was a great part of the student volunteer movement. And one of the conferences was the Ecumenical Missionary Conference of 1900 in New York City. And that, if I could share just a couple quotes just out of that conference as it relates to this. The first one from Dr. George Pentecost. He says this, he says, to the pastor belongs the privilege and the responsibility of solving the missionary problem. Until the pastors of our churches wake to the truth of this proposition and the foreign work of the church becomes a passion in their hearts and consciences, the chariot wheels of foreign missions will drive heavily. If there are churches that give not and pray not for foreign missions, it is because they have pastors who are false and, good old-fashioned term here, recreant or unfaithful to the command of Christ. So there's a pastor scholar calling out fellow pastors. If we're not leading, if we are not doing this ourselves, then we're not living up to what Christ commanded us to do. But he wasn't the only one who spoke there. S. Earl Taylor, who was an organizer of young people at that time, he said, speaking as a young person to fellow students, he says, until our pastors, and he's speaking to pastors as well, until our pastors are ready to back this enterprise, there will never be a missionary spirit adequate to the needs of this generation. And then another college student, D. Brewer Eddy, said, and he's talking about giving money to the work of missions. He says that the importance of leadership must be emphasized. You, pastors, you are the leaders. We young people are willing to follow you if you will guide us. Pastors have a responsibility for general spiritual oversight of the people God has entrusted to their care. Part of that has to include the missions piece, the foreign missions and the local, regional, and global outreach aspects of this. Pastors need to be missional. And in the book, I talk about this in terms of, how can I do this better? How, as a pastor or as an elder or deacon or another church leader, how can I do this? But read and study the Bible. What does the Bible say? Not just the Great Commission, but the entire Bible. What does the Bible say about missions and God's mission and God's purposes for us? And are you familiar with it yourself? Are you reading and studying missions-related material, pastor and elder, where you're reading a history of missions beyond the New Testament, reading missionary biographies, reading missions theology books and overviews of mission strategy and practice? Are you keeping in touch? Are you networking with other missions-minded people to help you? Are you reading books like mine, but not just mine? There are lots of books out there that get at different pieces of this.
Yeah.
Get a hold of them and read them, get some ideas. So read and study, but also teach the people you serve. Pastor, elder, church leader, teach what the Bible says about missions. Teach what theologians have said about the work of missions. Teach church history in the history of missions, and teach basic missions. What is missions? What is it? And inspire your people to get involved. Missions involvement. That's part of being a disciple that reproduces.
I just wanted to share this. I think that, Rich and I are not just attacking a pastor that's watching this. Obviously we want to encourage pastors to look at their hearts and examine their hearts, because again, I think it comes down to, and you and I have talked about this, that it's not just another program you got to add. It's not. We talked about that pastors sometimes are more caught up in the general day-to-day running of the church and trying to minister to their community and so forth. But at the same time, I think there's a recognition of need of this. And, I myself, I'm a delegator of people. I'm a delegator of people. I'm a delegator of people in ministry. I see a need for the ministry, but I realize in my heart, I don't always have to have my physical hands on that particular project. And I think the thing of it is like, we talked about this, they need to be, pray to be open about it. Lord, I understand about the Great Commission. I understand the need of global missions. I understand there's areas of this world that tens of thousands of people have never even heard the name of Jesus Christ. And what part do we need to play in that? What part do we need to put our hands to the plow and work that area?
Right.
And we talked about how pastors should take a trip. They should go on a mission trip. They should see missions firsthand. Like you said, they should start reading books, but also some pastors can realize I don't need to be involved in a day-to-day thing. I can find somebody passionate about it, because I really kind of think in your case, you're not like a senior pastor by my memory of our discussion. You're not a senior pastor, am I correct?
Not currently, but I've been pastoring in some capacity for around 26, 27 years.
But
at least half of that was as the senior lead pastor. So I do get it. I get those everyday responsibilities. I know sometimes I'm kind of atypical in some ways in terms of the missions piece, but at the same time, like you're saying, the one of the main roles of the pastor is to equip people to do ministry and to delegate, these types of things. So you want to have a good missions leader, a lay leader, for lack of a better term,
That's right.
and a committee, a team of people who's doing that, so that if you are not able to, or that's not your main passion, then you're comfortable with, you trust other people to do it. For me, that's an area of passion for me. But if it wasn't, I hope I would not see myself as absolved of doing something and keeping that going. And we're just talking about being a good, well-rounded pastor. And like you said, that doesn't mean you have to be involved with the day-to-day stuff.
Yes.
But as a pastor, we lead by example. And if we want our people to catch the missions, we'll make a nice, a bad word sound good. If we want people to catch the missions virus, in this case, this would be a good virus to catch, then we need to lead by example. And that's going to depend on, who is the Lord? How's the Lord created you? What is he asking you to do? And all of us, no matter what our involvement is, should take that humble posture of, Lord, what do you want me to do?
Yeah. And when I mentioned you not being a senior pastor, meaning I was more or less trying to say, hey, you'd be the prime example of a guy to say, look, I'm passionate about missions, pastor. I will take that role. I'll run with the torch. But at the same time, I don't think it's the senior pastor say, okay, thanks, Rich. And then just kind of, say, hey, I'll talk to you next year about it.
Right.
No, it's, it's an actual involvement, it's an actual involvement of making sure you're staying on point, making sure you're still staying passionate about it, making sure that you are inspiring the people of the congregation to be involved in it.
Right.
And then also giving support to it in the sense of, because that's one thing that I've always have found in leadership is that people are good at giving lip service to say, I want this activity over here, but then they take no part in promoting it or standing behind it or giving good face to it to where people say, well, hey, the pastor's excited about it, I guess I'm going to be excited about it. But if Rich is over here trying to toot the horn of missions and the pastor's like, that's kind of that's Rich's thing. He's excited about missions, but I really am not.
Right.
Well, guess what? How many people in the congregation are going to really even be excited about it with you, along with you, Rich? They're just not, because the senior pastor's not excited about it.
It's just like anything else. So whatever the pastor's excited about, that's where he's going to get buy-in. And that doesn't matter what it is. And if we're talking about a missions engagement, then yes, there needs to be some level of, this is what the Bible teaches. I'm responsible to teach you what the scriptures say, what God is saying to us. And this is how I'm involved. How can I help you get involved? How can I champion based on who I am? And we need to understand as pastors and church leaders that getting involved with missions doesn't mean, oh, we've discovered the magic bullet. We've discovered the big cure that's it's gonna help us to get more intentionally missional. And I know missional as a term is kind of started to get a bit nebulous. Well, what do you mean by missional? And there's a lot of critics about that. So what I mean is missional being, well, we're living on mission because this is God's mission for us. This is, we are the church, existing as the church, living as the body of Christ in this world, where our churches become embassies of God's kingdom as we are individually ambassadors of the King. And so that's what it is in my thinking, at least, to be missional and to be on mission. That's going to help us become healthier churches because we're functioning the way we should be. But getting involved with missions by itself, that's not a guarantee that all of a sudden everything's going to be fixed and poof, just like that. Anybody who's done ministry knows it's not that easy. Yeah. It's not that simple to do that, whether we're talking about missions or name a ministry in the church, right? It's just not a reality. But yet that's the kind of life the Lord calls us to, and He empowers us to do it with the Holy Spirit. And He doesn't just say, "Okay, go to it." What is it that Jesus says in the Great Commission? He says, "By the way, I'm sending you with my authority, but I'm also going with you. Mm-hmm. I'm leading the way. I will never leave you in this. I'm leading the way." So over the years, I've sometimes a little too slowly, perhaps, but that's part of the sanctification process, right? But I've disciplined myself as a pastor and church leader to be a little more focused on, okay, Lord, what is it you are already doing, and what is it you're inviting us to step into alongside what you're doing, mm-hmm. based on how you've created us with the gifts and the skills that you've given us individually, but that are also seen in us when we're together as a local body of believers. And because not every church has to do everything the same, or every ministry program, even. Just sure. Because the church down the street's doing it doesn't mean we've got to do it.
Yeah.
But that's a whole other discussion too.
Well, I think churches can get involved in missions, like you said, in different mm-hmm. forms or fashion. I mean, some churches are probably more passionate about just saying, okay, we help fund missions. Mm-hmm. I do encourage any church or any pastor that's watching. Again, as a full-time missionary, sure, I appreciate funding. I need funding, but at the same time, when I have a church that actually is taking a mental note of what we're doing and has an actual interest in what we're doing and what we're trying to accomplish down here, trust me, I embrace that. I love to feel like I'm connecting that actual church to the mission field and mm-hmm. actually fulfilling that piece or role or part that they feel passionate about. Like we ourselves, we're more of a pastoral support down here in Honduras. We focus mm-hmm. on pastors. We focus on teaching, ministering, helping them raise up like children's ministers and so forth. So we have this pastoral role. We have a mission team coming in November. We're like, hey, pastor, what is your needs? Well, I have some electrical needs in my church. So we're actually going to man some people there, and we're going to help put some electrical in a building that he has. So what I'm saying is that's kind of what we do. So see, to me, it would be like a pastor in the U.S. saying, look, I have a need, a passion in my heart to connect the missions. I want to connect with a ministry that has a heart for pastoral care, maybe mm-hmm. in Honduras or in the rural areas. See, that's how I define myself. We look for rural areas. We look for rural pastors that are ignored, that are not even thought of in the rural area, mountain regions of Honduras. So I'm just saying that pastor in the U.S. says, I'm trying to find that. Hey, here's a missionary that's fulfilling that. I want to make a connection, and I want to be that liaison, so to speak, in country to connect me to those pastors that he's reaching, that I want to reach. And then, periodically contact and say, hey, how's Pastor so-and-so? How's Pastor Juan
Right.
doing? How's Pastor Jose or Carlos or Pastor Maria doing? What can we do to help her? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
That to me
absolutely.
is a ministerial connection. But again, not all churches want to do that. If they want to support missions through financially, that's fine. And then also we know of mission organizations that are in the US based, but then they connect churches in the U.S. into the mission field as well. And I know that that's a viable way of connecting to the mission field as well. So there's many different ways to
Oh
do
yeah.
mission work.
Lots of on ramps of engagement here. In the big picture, engagement means praying for as a sender, because again, if you're not sent out as a missionary, that means you are in sender role. So our responsibility in this collaborative effort is to, as we send, we commit to pray and to support with our prayers. We commit to give, because even though God owns everything, by his design, one of the ways he invites us to participate in what he's doing is to finance what he's doing. And sometimes he'll do it miraculously, right? But many times he's asking us to step out in obedience. So pray, give, and care for missionaries, whether it's somebody we've directly sent out or people we've just entered into a relationship with. Well, how do you care for missionaries? That's a wide open question. At least stay in communication with. And in these days, we have things like Zoom, and people still use Skype and some other things. We email, all kinds of ways, various kinds of apps that we can be in communication with each other. There's no reason why we can't engage somehow. Again, going back to who has God designed us to be, and what are some ways. We don't all have to do it the same way. And we don't all have to be engaged in the same projects in the same areas of the world. Yet God moves us in these ways, and places people and projects and nations and people groups on our hearts, individually and collectively, where we begin to get more focused and engaged. For example, from a pastoral perspective, what I always suggest to people is you step in, even if you're a small church. Just because you're a small church, which is most churches in North America, that doesn't mean you get to sit out and say, well, we're small, we can't. Well, there's a lot you can do. And as you start getting more involved, you can partner together with other small churches in your area, and you can do that together. There's lots of ways. Yeah. Big churches can help little churches, et cetera, et cetera. But I like to encourage churches to get into a partnership, a ministry partnership, with at least a partnership of some kind, a connection of some kind in every region or every continent of the world, because that keeps the broad global focus going, and also keeps you more narrowly focused on, okay, well, I'm just trying to, 50 different countries popped into my head for examples, but say you wanted to get involved with Russia. Russia's a pretty big country with a lot of people groups. Who in Russia? What people group? What city? What area in Russia are you more inclined to partner with? Those types of things.
Yeah. This is really not on our notes and what we were going to discuss today, but a thought does come to mind because, again, I think being who you are in the book that you wrote, I think you probably have this answer. Not only do we, you and I, believe that churches should be involved in world missions, but what about development of missionaries?
Oh, yeah.
I threw I threw a wrench into this whole entire conversation.
That's not a wrench at all. That's a great parallel kind of track to this discussion. The church is the primary sending agency, and when there are non-denominational parachurch agencies ideally they're sending missionaries out alongside a church, in partnership with churches, and missionaries have a home church that they're attached to, those types of things. And I think along with that churches do need to get more involved and more intentional with preparing people to be sent and to go out as what we would call traditional missionaries. We haven't always done a good job with that, and a lot of it's getting better in recent years. And again, it doesn't matter what size church you are, you can do this. And I do address this. One chapter in the book is devoted to future missionaries. Well, how do we identify and raise up missionaries, and how do we begin to prepare them? And I suggest that we start exposing our children, and we don't need to wait till they're adults or even teenagers. We can work with kids, and children will, and I know many will receive a calling to missionary service as a young child. Well, are we coming alongside them and helping them to grow in their faith and in their relationship with Christ? Are we coming alongside and mentoring them and doing what we can to prepare them for that as they go through our children's ministry programs, as they go through our youth ministry programs, and into college and beyond, before we turn them over to the colleges and seminaries and other training institutes that will give them even more in-depth training to add to what we've done? Are we coming alongside them, or are we just saying, well, that's great, let us know when you get older and we'll help you find the right college? Well, by that time, many kids have, they've kind of moved on to the next thing. If we don't hear what they're hearing from the Lord, if we're not coming alongside them, then pretty soon the idea of a missionary goes the way of, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a fireman. I want to be a policeman. I want to be a doctor. I want to be president. But how many kids actually end up growing up to do that? So yeah, the church has a significant role to play there. Again, it goes back to helping them learn what the scriptures say about missions, and introducing them to the history of missions and the history of the church, and basic theological understanding of missions, and maybe having the one-on-one mentoring, especially if you happen to have retired missionaries and or retired pastors and other church leaders. The young person, older person dynamic is longed for with the younger generations, and often missing in their lives. And that can be a significant voice. And we can have mentors that will directly mentor and come alongside, and we can have them read through missionary biographies. And I can't remember where I first got this idea many, many years ago, but I wrote a little bit about it in this chapter of Future Missionaries in the book. And the missions pastor I work with in Pittsburgh, he and I are starting to talk about what if we brought together, these people who are called to serve as missionaries. What if we began to bring them together as cohorts? And I know some other churches that are doing something similar, where we walk them through this journey together, and mixed generations and ages, mixed backgrounds, and just exploring, because everybody has the same questions. How am I going to get from here to there? Do I need to go to seminary? Do I need to go to college? If so, what do I need to study? And help me even understand what missions is. And there's a lot of those kinds of things. So yeah, the church should be doing what we can to prepare.
Because obviously it doesn't magically happen.
No.
I myself, our church, our home church, our one of our statements is mission or ministry producing center. Our goal is to produce ministers of the gospel. Now, whether it be at the home front or out in the mission field. And just this summer, we have one young lady in our church, and then also my pastor's daughter. She's the director of missions. She more or less is kind of like the go-to person within the organization that we're a part of. And basically she brought another young lady down from another church in Michigan, and they interned here and we walked him through the whole entire. We didn't roll out the red carpet for him. We just basically said, this is missions, and we gave him a real true picture of missions. And so it was intentional. It wasn't like, hey, we're going to go on this mission trip. Oh, you have a heart for missions. Come with us. No, we're going to design a mission trip around specifically for you two because you have a heart for missions, and we're going to, spend time with you, conversing with you, and so forth. So I'm just saying that, I think sometimes when churches think about missions, they think, oh, mission trip, sending money, sending work-related projects. But how many churches are saying raising up missionaries, sending out missionaries? Right. I'm not, okay, obviously I don't agree with the Mormon church. Okay. But I understand that, they send out missionaries. We have mission. Okay. They send out Mormon missionaries. Let's just coin it that way. That they send them out. I mean, they're global. They're all over the world.
Right.
And we have them in our community. They're very intentional about sending people out into the foreign lands to be missionaries. And, obviously some of them are just a 1-year commitment, but I'm just saying they're very intentional about it. So why would our churches not be intentional about raising up missionaries and exposing them to the world of missions?
Right. Yeah, and that takes us back to our earlier in the conversation. We were talking about short-term missions. That's part of doing short-term missions well, to have that intentionality, to see that we're not just sending out a team to get the experience, et cetera, et cetera. We're building in a formational piece by design, and there are some short-term agencies that are starting to really focus in on this as part of their experiences. I'm not going to name drop any of them, but there's one that in particular I've worked with, and I've taken teams to where about a third of what is done in the ministry experience is all spiritual formation related and practical things. This one team just happened to take place in the inner city of Chicago, and part of that formation process was, listen, we're in a multicultural church. This is a multi-ethnic community that we live in. We have 20 some nations are in this community. Day one, we're going to send you out in pairs, and we want you to walk all over the neighborhood and just make some observations. What are you noticing? What are you observing? And then, in 30 minutes, 40 minutes, come back and we're going to debrief it. What did you see? Part of the things that they do, it's inner city. There's a big problem with homelessness, and they are involved with some local ministry with a homeless shelter. Well, in the morning, okay, we want you to go out, and we know that it might be 30 degrees or 50 degrees or whatever. It might be 80 degrees. We want you to go out. Now, they didn't do this. I led a group of adults. They didn't make us do this. But when they send the teens out, they have them actually take off their shoes. And, we went out without our coats on, or at least I asked our team. I said, I'm not going to require it, but I'm going to go without my coat, because this is going to give us, we're going to walk around the neighborhood and we're going to do some praying, but we're also going to do some observing, and maybe you'll get into some discussions, but that gives you an experience of a homeless person. Well, that evening, then we went and spent an evening with the homeless shelter, not to serve them meals, not to do anything other than to sit with the residents at the shelter and just, what's your story? Tell me about yourself, that type of a thing. And, always doing the formational pieces, doing the spiritual formations is not just we're going to have a 10-minute devotional and we're off for a day, but, a deep, intentional, this is an area of the Christ life that we need to pay attention to. Maybe you haven't thought about, and by the end of the week, the last session where we the group session ends with a foot washing exercise. And the hosts, the missions leaders, they're not even there. They said, this is you, the team leader, and your team. We're going to let you have some time of just humility and whatever you want to do. And it becomes and I think now not every site in this organization does that, but they all do something along those lines where
Yeah.
there's a formational piece built in, because that's a part of what we're doing here. And that becomes a part of the overall. We can do this in our churches too. We don't even have to necessarily do a missions trip with an agency. We can do our own trip, and we can be very intentional about that. And that becomes a piece of it. And that I think is one of the ways we can do short-term missions better, when we see it as part of the long-term strategy, but we also see it as yes, while this isn't just a check this off on my spiritual development, but it is a formational piece that we should continue to follow up with and follow through on. So it becomes a very significant piece of that. And when you get the missionaries and the national workers involved, man, that makes it even more exciting and more in-depth and formational. Because we recognize, and you alluded to this, we wish this all happened last week, right? I mean, we wish it was that instant. But we all know, you and I know, that this is not a microwave kind of Christianity. That this is not a microwave formation process. We're in the crock pot. This is a slow cook. It takes time for everything to really come in, and it takes intentionality.
So I think, in closing, I just think that, a lot more thought needs to go behind missions in a local church than just kind of like just kind of throwing mud against the wall and see what sticks and says, hey, we did our spiritual thing this year. We took the mission trip. But I think really, obviously, if a pastor really wants to try to balance everything out, they can see that intentional missions, well-developed, well thought out mission trip can not only be a benefit in the actual field itself, but it actually can come back into the local church in a full circle. Because I can truly say that being exposed to other areas and other cultures of the world has radically changed my heart and my life. And I've had other pastors say that when you do mission work out of your church into the world, it creates better parishioners or people within the body of Christ for local service as well. It's just like a total full entire circle, and it's a full entire benefit, not only for the local church, for the lives of the people that serve at that church.
And when we begin to get involved globally, guess what happens? That directly impacts what we do locally. And the same is true. The reverse is true. When we start getting engaged locally, that impacts how we do things regionally and globally. So it really is engagement in the one mission. And it's just, is it a local expression that's more what we would consider to be evangelism among people who are already reached? Or are we talking about regional expression or the global expression? And it all feeds into each other and inspires. What we do globally should inspire what we do locally. When I was the last time I was in senior pastor mode for 10 years, we had a lot of churches have a moment for missions. We called ours Spotlight on the Mission. And you'd say, a lot of churches do it. Some churches do it once a week. Some do it once a month. I was doing it once a month. I'm like, no, we need to, people are starting to say, well, what about local? I said, you're right. What about local? And so we started doing a Spotlight Global and a Spotlight Local. And I was always, every time I'm like, this should inspire what we're doing. And sometimes we do a regional Spotlight, just to remind everybody, it's Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth. It's not either or, it's all of the above. Well, we know the local church is the body of Christ. I'm going to leave this example here. I'm not going to say I'm a health nut, but I like health. I like to eat right. I like to take care of myself. And, I have a coconut tree in my front yard, and it doesn't always produce coconuts, meaning on a regular basis to where I can make coconut juice on a constant basis. And I've just kind of thought about that because I got to drink coconut juice every day because of all the great benefits. But then I started realizing, wait a minute,
there's this thing called hibiscus. They call it Jamaica hibiscus. It's like a hibiscus tea. It's healthy for your blood pressure, your cholesterol, and things like that. Cool. And I started realizing what I need to do is put a healthy balance of various things into my diet, like avocados, olive oil, just all these different things that I do on a regular basis to put a healthy balance into my diet. And I think it's the same thing as a pastor should just consciously be thinking a healthy diet and a balance for his body, for his church. Yes. And part of that healthy diet is incorporating missions into the church.
Yeah, and I would suggest it's one of the food staples in this diet. It's not an optional. Hey, it'd be nice if this was part of the diet. I would suggest it's a huge part of the diet. This is not we eat it when we want to and inject it in, but it's something we should be eating all the time.
Yeah. All right. Well, Rich, it was awesome talking to you. I really, it's an honor that you jumped on here on the Zoom call, and thank you for just imparting some of your wisdom and insight in mission. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for this opportunity. It was an honor to be part of this discussion. I love having these kinds of discussions. In case you didn't pick up on that.
Yeah, I picked up on it. I know you think missions, breathe missions, eat missions. So anyway, it's definitely a part of your life. And anybody that's watching, I highly recommend you read his book. It's well researched, well thought out. It's a great read and a lot of insight on missions. So anyway,
thank you so much. Yeah,
and also I'll make sure your the link to your book is in the description of this video.
Great. Thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure.
God bless you, brother.
You too.
Bye-bye.